Hey guys, welcome to lesson 13B. We are going to learn about how there are different body systems in a vertebrae, such as different organs, and how they play an important role in the entirety of the vertebrae's structure. So, not only do vertebraes have a common skeletal structure, but they have very similar organ structures or organ systems as well. And so we're going to learn about what those specific important structures are that all of these vertebrae have in common. So the first thing that we need to know is about the circulatory system. This is a system that is going to be in charge of transporting oxygen, getting rid of carbon dioxide, and then also moving all the other nutrients throughout your body. The major parts that play in your circulatory system is your blood and also your heart. Okay, so let's talk about the blood. So blood is found in all vertebrates, and it's going to circulate as your heart pumps it out. So your heart is basically the main muscle that is pumping your blood throughout your entire body. Your blood is able to be kind of like a transport system where it's going to carry food to cells that are far from the digestive tract so that they're getting nourished. And they're also very important in carrying oxygen to cells and then carbon dioxide away from cells, especially those that are away and farther from your lungs and gills in certain animals that have gills. So, blood not only carries nutrients and food, but it also carries waste and also carries hormones to and from the body cells. This is important to create a homeostatic balance for your body so that your internal balance of the body is stable and good. And without blood, you would die because blood is life. It even says in the Bible in Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11, the life of the flesh is in the blood. So blood is super duper important. Without it, again, we would not be able to survive. So the diagram that you see here, this is actually a very common diagram that you will probably encounter throughout biology, but this is basically showing how blood is moving throughout your body. And so, let me go back a second. So like I said, this diagram shows you how blood is being carried throughout your body. And when you look at this diagram, you will notice that there's red and blue. That does not mean you have red and blue blood. All blood in humans, especially vertebrates, which are humans, are going to be red blood. There is no such thing as blue blood in vertebrates. So the red blood is simply, the red color in the diagram is simply showing oxygenated blood, which just means blood that has oxygen. And then the blue showing deoxygenated blood, which just means that it's carrying carbon dioxide in it. Again, blood is red, it's not blue. And in humans, especially, when you have oxygenated blood, it's going to be a bright red color. So if you have a cut on your hand and you first initially bleed, the first initial blood drops that come out of your cut are going to be bright red because they're fully oxygenated. Once it becomes deoxygenated, it will turn a darker red. So if you see like dry blood or blood that's been exposed, out for a long time, it will become a darker red. Let's talk about heart chambers. So heart chambers, so first of all, how does a heart pump blood? So a vertebrate heart has spaces inside of them called chambers. These are basically walls that are made of a heart muscle. These chambers, which are muscular walls, they contract or squeeze so that they force the blood to move out of each of these chambers. Between each of these chambers, there's something called valves. They kind of look like little doors. And these valves will shut once the blood has left so that they can't come back into a previous chamber. So they can't cause backflow. So blood is only going to be flowing in one direction. Okay, so there's a couple important terms that we need to know when we talk about the heart. One is that there are blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart, and these are called your arteries. There are also something called veins, which are blood vessels that carry blood toward the heart. So arteries are away from the heart. You can kind of think about is A for arteries, A for away. And then veins are the ones, blood vessels that return the blood back to the heart. Blood from the veins are going to be important because they are going to refill the heart chambers after the heart chambers have contracted so that there's no more blood because they pumped it all out. So the veins will come back with new blood and fill in those chambers that had pumped out their blood prior. Okay, so different vertebrates have different number of heart chambers. So for example, a fish has only 2 chambers in their heart. The first chamber receives the blood, and then the second chamber will pump the blood into the gills where they use it to be oxygenated, and then from there they will go to the rest of the body. As the blood is moving through the rest of the body, it will start to become more and more deoxygenated because the oxygen is being used up for different parts of the body. Then they'll return back to the first chamber in order to get oxygenated once again. Most of your reptiles and amphibians are going to have 3 chambers in their heart. The first one's going to, again, collect all of the oxygenated blood from the lungs. Then they're going to send it out, and the second chamber is going to collect all the deoxygenated blood from the body. And then the third chamber will receive both blood from the first and second chamber and mixes it, and then it will pump it to the body and the lungs at the same time. So that's an interesting twist. Birds, mammals, and humans, we all have 4 chambers in our hearts. Chambers on the right of our heart is going to pump deoxygenated blood into the lungs so that they can get oxygenated once again. Chambers on the left are going to pump the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the rest of the body. And then the oxygenated blood will travel to the body and become deoxygenated and return again to the right side of the heart. In birds, mammals, and humans, the blood that's healthy will never mix with unhealthy blood. They're going to be separate. Okay, so looking at this, reading how complex our hearts are and how and the way that the circulatory system functions with other parts of our body makes us realize that how can we have evolution play into this? Because according to evolution, everything started from one cell, everything started to grow in complexity over time. So you're having one thing being created at a time. But in order for any type of living organism that has a heart or a circulatory system to function, you can't just have a heart, you need to have every other part of the body as well, such as your respiratory system. So evolution doesn't really fit into this, because in evolution it says, well, the heart system was created first and then all the other systems came to be one by one. But that doesn't work if you look at the function in what we see today in animals. So this gives way to that there has to be a divine creator and designer, aka God, that created everything at once in order for this to function in unison. Okay, so let's talk about the respiratory system. The respiratory system is involved with gas exchange. So you're bringing, the respiratory system is going to bring in fresh oxygen and carry away carbon dioxide. And this will happen with the use of 2 structures, which is our lungs and gills. So gills, so for vertebrates that have gills, they are going to be living in water. Like sharks and bony fish. These are the ones that will have gills, which will allow them to take oxygen from the water and then also help them to get rid of carbon dioxide. Gills are going to be found in some invertebrates as well, like clams, lobsters, worms, etc. And then amphibians, like frogs, when they are in their younger stage, such as tadpoles, they also will have gills and then slowly get rid of them when they get older. So gills actually look like tiny fingers. If you look at this picture right here, they kind of look like tiny fingers coming out. And they are going to be supplied with lots of capillaries. And capillaries is just very microscopic, very tiny blood vessels in which the blood is going to exchange gases and other materials with either the environment or within the body. And so what you're going to have is that the capillaries are going to have deoxygenated blood be exchanged, or the deoxygenated blood in the capillaries are going to exchange the carbon dioxide it got from the body, and then they're going to exchange it for oxygen that comes from the water. So again, the capillaries are going to carry blood that are deoxygenated because they're coming from the body, and then it will take the carbon dioxide from this deoxygenated blood and swap it for the oxygen that's freshly coming in from the water. So gills, in summary, are going to take the deoxygenated blood so that it can become oxidized or oxygenated. Oxygen in water is not actually from the oxygen that you find in H2O. So the O in H2O stands for oxygen, but the oxygen that we get in water is not from that O in H2O. Oxygen in water is actually the gas oxygen that is dissolved in the water. Something like, if, for example, if you take sugar and you mix it in tea, now you have sugar dissolved in the tea. So that's how it works in water as well. And if you actually taste water that has oxygen in it, it's going to have a sweeter taste versus water that has no oxygen in it, it will be more flat. Okay, so the lungs is another important structure that you need to breathe. So what's the definition of lungs? It's air chambers inside of an animal's body where blood can get oxygenated and then release the CO2 or carbon dioxide that it carries. Lungs in animals are going to be different, and they can vary between the vertebrates that we see. And lungs also have capillaries, which are the tiny blood vessels that we talked about, in which the deoxygenated blood becomes oxygenated. So what is breathing? Breathing is basically moving air in and out of the lungs. Frogs, for example, they fill their mouth with air and literally force the air into their lungs, almost like they're swallowing it. And then birds have muscle contraction in order for their air sacs to open and close to breathe. In mammals or humans, we have something called a diaphragm to help us breathe. So what is a diaphragm? It's basically a thin layer of muscle that separates our chest chamber from our abdomen chamber. So in humans, for example, when our diaphragm contracts or squeezes, it actually goes down lower into our abdomen, therefore allowing our chest or our lungs in our chest to expand or get bigger when we breathe in air. When we breathe in air, our lungs will expand or get bigger, and then when we breathe out air, what happens is the muscles in your abdomen and chest area will push on the diaphragm so that the diaphragm can return to its original position, causing air to be pushed out and for us to breathe it out. Okay, now we have to talk about the nervous system. So the nervous system has two main divisions. It has a central nervous system, also abbreviated as CNS, and then peripheral nervous system, also known as the PNS. So what is the central nervous system? It has the brain, which is protected by the skull, and then it has the spinal cord, which is basically your spine, and your spinal cord is protected by your vertebral column. So your spinal cord will actually run through your vertebrae or your vertebral column, so it protects it. The peripheral nervous system has nerves that come from the central nervous system, and then it also has sensory receptors all over your body, like on your skin, your eyes, things like that. And then it also has sensory organs, such as your eye would be a sensory organ, and it will have sensory receptors within it. Your skin would be a sensory organ which has skin receptors or sensory receptors on it. So from the brain, there are nerves called the cranial nerves, and they're going to carry impulses from the sensory organs, such as, or from the sensory organs in your head. So they would be like your eyes, your nose, your eardrum, and they're going to get that impulses from, say, your eye or your nose or your eardrum, and they're going to take it to your brain. Nerves from the spinal cord are called your spinal nerves, and they're going to get information from sensory receptors like on your skin or your internal organs, and they're going to take it to your spinal cord. Other spinal nerves can relay information from your spinal cord to other muscles and organs in your body as well. So what is a sensory organ? Basically, it's just going to be a bunch of sensory receptors that are on that specific organ. And they're going to receive one specific environmental factor. So for example, your eye would be sensitive to light. Your nose would be sensitive to smell, so on and so forth. So your peripheral nervous system, or your PNS, they're going to carry stimulus through your peripheral nervous system to your central nervous system, which is your CNS. Your PNS can also carry impulses from your central nervous system to different muscles and organs that are being controlled by your nervous system throughout your body. An organism's reaction is controlled by your central nervous system. So, for example, a frog's eyes can see a fly while it's sitting on a lily pad, but the brain is what tells the frog if it should eat the fly or not. Say the frog's brain says, "Hey, you're hungry, let's eat the fly." Your central nervous system would also allow different parts of your muscles to help catch the fly or try to catch the fly, so that the different parts of the limbs, or say the tongue, or maybe it's webbed feet, need to all work together in order to try to catch the fly. Your central nervous system also controls many internal processes like involuntary muscle contractions, such as your digestive tract to help digest food and push it along, or your circulatory system, like the blood moving as well. Things that you don't really think about. So you don't tell yourself, okay, stomach, start to digest. It automatically does it. So your central nervous system takes care of that. Okay, I want you guys to take a moment and read page 284, and then discuss what biomimicry is. Basically, it's just using living things to discover solutions that humans have, and issues that we have, and seeing if we can solve them through just the education of other living things. Okay, so the digestive system, how it works is that food moves from your mouth. You eat, say, a hamburger. It will go down your esophagus and into your stomach. Your stomach is basically a muscle that will squeeze and help to mix the food with digestive enzymes and your acid. And then your stomach will then go into your small intestine. The small boxes that you see are supposed to be arrows. So if you want to draw that, if you don't see that in your notes. Your small intestine is going to release digestive enzymes as well in order to help to digest the food more thoroughly and to remove the nutrients that it needs. Those nutrients will then get dissolved into your bloodstream to go throughout your body to where it's needed and to different cells. So there's two organs that are attached to the small intestine to make additional enzymes and other substances to help further digestion. One of these organs is the liver. The liver produces something that's like a greenish fluid called bile. Bile basically is made up of substances to help break down fat. And bile is going to be stored in something called your gallbladder until it's needed to break down whatever fat needs to be broken down. And then you also have your pancreas. Your pancreas also has specific enzymes that will be released into the small intestine in order to break down things like starches, proteins, and fats as well. Okay. So your small intestine is super curvy and has a lot of loops to it. You can kind of tell in the picture. And people or animals that have, are mainly animals that are plant eaters, they will have longer small intestine because it takes longer for them to be to digest that material, versus meat eaters, it won't be as long. And then when the food is completely digested, it is going to be absorbed through the walls of the intestine and into the bloodstream, so that it can go to different cells throughout the body. Your small intestine will then lead into the large intestine, where it's going to absorb excess water that's still there, so that it can be reused throughout your body. Once the large intestine has taken out the excess water, it will then send it to the anus, which is when you pretty much poop it out. And it's going to just get rid of the waste products that is no longer needed by your body. Okay, so there's three categories that vertebrates can be put into based on what they eat. So there's herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Herbivores, you've probably heard of, eat plants such as cows, horses, lizards. There are some of them, some fish, and some birds. You can think of them as the vegetarians of the animal group. Carnivores eat other animals or meat, so snakes, sharks, frogs, some birds, tigers, wolves, mongooses. They're all carnivores. And then omnivores are animals that eat both. So they will eat both plant and animals, such as bears and pigs. Okay, the excretory system is basically how you get rid of certain wastes. So all vertebrates have an organ called the kidneys, as well as you do. You have two of them, but you can survive off of one. Kidneys are important because they filter wastes that are in the blood. One of the wastes are urea, which is basically collected from cells that use up protein. The wastes that are picked up from the blood usually come from body tissues throughout your body, and then they get taken to the kidney. The kidneys are surrounded by capillaries, again, those small blood vessels that we talked about that take deoxygenated and convert it to oxygenated blood. So the waste will leave the blood and enter the kidney enter the kidney tubules through something called, and then into something called the ureter. So you can see in this diagram, the ureter is this like long tubey thing that goes down to the bladder. So again, kidneys have a lot of these tiny tubes that are surrounded by these capillaries, which are those tiny blood vessels that we talked about. The blood will flow through the capillaries, and then the waste from the blood will enter these tubes. The waste goes from the tubes of the kidneys to the ureter. The waste will then become urine. So the urine will be then stored in something called your bladder or your urinary bladder before it passes outside of your body. So these are a lot of systems that we talked about. Make sure that you understand what they do and how the important role that they play in an animal's body and even our body. And then I will see you guys in the next section.